Officer Gary Barthel joins me. He, of course, is a former Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel. Gary, thanks so much for taking the time this afternoon. I know I kind of sneak attacked you on this one.
Hey, no problem, Sully. Thanks for having me.
So, first of all, you heard the story, and then you heard this last guy. Give me your first pass take on this whole thing.
Well, I really think that this trial is more of a political issue than anything else, and right or wrong, I think the government feels that it's in a position that they have to take some action and take him to trial. I think the problem is if they don't, it's going to have some international implications, primarily with people in Iraq. Especially after we've been in there for so long. We've freed the country. We've given it to the people. We've helped them rebuild. And then to have an incident that allegedly took place like this with Sergeant Hutchins, it really puts a damper on our ability to further our international relationships with not only the Iraqi people, but with other people in other combatant areas that we're currently involved in.
Let me ask you, how can someone get retried, even though it's political? I understand all of that. I understand why they're doing it, Gary, but how can they do it? How can they get, if he's already in the brig for 5.5 years or something, I mean, first of all, how can it happen legally? And number two, isn't there a better way around that?
The way it normally works is after a court-martial, it will go up to on appeal to, in this case, the Navy and Marine Corps Criminal Appellate Court. And that court will look at it and determine whether or not there's any errors that were committed during the course of the trial. And if there were, they'll remand it. In this case, what the Navy and Marine Corps Appellate Court did is they found that there was an error that was committed by the military judge in that the judge erroneously or improperly severed Sergeant Hutchins' relationship with somebody on the defense team. That was an issue that initially went up on appeal with the United States Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals, and they found that there was error, and they set aside the findings and the sentence. At that point, the government appealed to the next highest level military court, appellate court, which is the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. Now, that Court of Appeals is comprised of 5 civilian judges. Mm-hmm. They looked at that decision by the United States Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals, and they agreed that the judge improperly severed the relationship between Sergeant Hutchins and his defense counsel, but the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces found that there was no error committed, although it happened. Uh-huh. They found that there was no error, and so they sent it back down to the U.S. Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals and asked them to reconsider. On reconsideration, the U.S. Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals reinstated the findings in the sentence. Once that happened, then Sergeant Hutchins appealed again, and this time he raised 2 issues. On the second appeal, he raised the issue of undue command influence, and he raised the issue that his Fifth Amendment rights were violated and that he was improperly detained or confined in a trailer for 7 days. He had exercised his right to speak to an attorney, but the government never made an attorney available to him. And then when NCIS came back and questioned him a second time, well, actually what they did is they came and they asked to search his things. The appellate court held that reinitiation by the NCIS agent is what led Sergeant Hutchins to give a statement, and that statement was used against him.
Got it. So real quickly here, I'm against the break. What happens next for this guy?
Okay, so what happens next is the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces remanded the case back to the Department of the Navy and gave them the option of retrying him again because they set aside the sentence and findings finding that Sergeant Hutchins was denied his Fifth Amendment rights. So the finding and sentence were set aside, and the government now has the opportunity to retry him once again. Again, this time it would be without a statement that was provided by Sergeant Hutchins.
Gotcha. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to stay on top of this, and I'm going to lean on you again as it gets closer there. But I appreciate your time, Gary. Gary, do you have a website that if people want more information on military law?
Yes, my website is militarylawcenter.com.
There you go. I appreciate it. Gary Barthel, he is a former lieutenant colonel in the Marines and a former JAG officer, and he has his finger on the pulse of this thing. So we'll keep an eye on the story and see what happens next. I have huge news relating the employment picture and who's going to win the Super Bowl. That's coming up at 35 past the hour. In the meantime, Mark Evans in the KOGO News Room. What are you working on, pal?
All right,